is Kelly English, and I'm from the Arthritis Patient Advisory Board for the Arthritis Research Canada. And I'm here with Dr. Anne McCarthy, Department of Medicine at the Ottawa Hospital General Campus. And I believe that you have an interest in epidemiology. Is that your main focus?
I do have an interest in epidemiology. I think my main focus is tropical medicine and preventable infectious diseases, including immunizations, preventing by immunization.
And your session is?
So my session is about travel medicine and rheumatological conditions.
Perfect. And I know there's a lot of interest in this.
So
So can you tell us just a little bit about yourself and how you got into that field?
So I graduated from Memorial University a long time ago, joined the military in medical school, and eventually the military wanted a tropical medicine expert. So I did specialty training in infectious disease and tropical medicine, retired more than a decade ago, and I've been in Ottawa for almost 30 years doing infectious disease, tropical medicine, and travel medicine.
So we've been talking just a bit ahead of time, and I know that some of my listeners particularly had a great deal of interest in things like what areas a person, what does somebody with RA, for example, or another inflammatory disease, or even osteo, have to think about before they go on trips as far as tropical bugs?
So I think tropical bugs and infection are important things to think about, but even before that, it's the reality of some of the travel. Can they get around and do what they think they want to do? Is there medical care if they have a flare of whatever their disease is? And also planning to see somebody probably other than the rheumatologist, somebody with an interest in travel medicine and expertise to help them do the things they can to try and prevent getting sick. Sick from their underlying disease or just the regular sort of sick that might be potentially disabling for some people or interfere with their ability to take their drugs to control their disease.
Absolutely. Just a case of diarrhea, for example, for somebody with diabetes, which
difference.
So many of us have from underlying medications or whatever,
Right,
could
exactly.
be really serious.
Exactly.
Now, should a person be thinking even before you even think about travel then?
I think so. I think you should be thinking almost, although it's difficult, almost years ahead. Some of the things that you need for travel are just your routine vaccinations, like tetanus, for example. So getting that vaccine early before you go on significant disease-modifying agents may help with respect to a better immune response. Things like influenza vaccine people should get because influenza occurs more in the tropics, and we spend a lot of time in airplanes when we travel. It's a great place for things like influenza to be transmitted. For travel, hepatitis A and B, you really need to have protection against them. You can get them when you're on immune modulating agents or even high doses of prednisone, but they may not work as well. So it's better if people can get their vaccines up to date before they get on those treatments. And things like live vaccines, so yellow fever is one thing that people think about. If you're going to Africa, you need proof of that vaccine to get into some countries. And it's not safe for people that are on anti-TNF drugs or other disease-modifying agents. So they need to be thought about beforehand, or you need to see somebody who'll give you the proper paperwork to get across borders.
Perfect. That's something to really think about. And as far as protection, there's talk now about Zika and mosquito, not just Zika, but mosquito-borne
Infections.
disease. Yeah, that's exactly right. That's the word I was looking for. Are there precautions that we should take for traveling that everybody should take? But let's face it, if you're a young 26-year-old healthy young man, you might not do, but that we need to think about.
I think all of us are guilty of not doing what we can to prevent mosquito bites. So they talk about things like DEET or other repellents that you put on your skin that are very effective, very safe. I call deep my tropical perfume. I put it on in the morning when I get up because there's day-biting mosquitoes. I put it on in the afternoon because there's ones that bite around supper time. You know, just making that a habit when you're somewhere. Having screened quarters, if you're in air-conditioned quarters, it's a bit less of a risk because a lot of mosquitoes, like I say, will bite at dusk and dawn. And using something on clothing, which you can't get in Canada, but you can get in the US and you can get in most destinations, called permethrin. And if you spray your clothes with permethrin, soak them, let them dry, they're good for about 4 weeks of travel.
Wow.
So
Okay.
that really helps to keep you from getting bitten. It's the same insecticide that they use on many bed nets to try and prevent people from getting malaria in countries where that's a risk. But that works very, very well. And I just think we don't do a very good job of it. It's an easy thing to do, an easy habit to make.
Exactly.
You mentioned Zika in particular. Zika is not a great disease. A lot of people have heard a lot about it, but it's not only a problem for pregnant women or women of childbearing age. There's been a lot of adverse effects after Zika infection, not necessarily rheumatological, but some people have had some neurological symptoms that you'd like to avoid. And in my talk today, in my workshop, we're going to talk about dengue fever and chikungunya. And chikungunya can give you an illness like rheumatoid arthritis, which many of your listeners are familiar with, that sometimes lasts for years. So it's an inflammatory arthritis that can be quite disabling.
Well, I can tell people to avoid that one right away. What areas would you, for example, did those two?
So the more research we do, the more we realize they're in a lot of places. Chikungunya started in Africa, it's throughout Southeast Asia, throughout now the Caribbean and the Americas, so more and more. And dengue is everywhere, I think, if you look for it. In some countries, in Africa, for example, we're not sure how much of which of the viruses are there because there's not the ability to do the testing.
And there's not the reporting either, I imagine, like we have.
Right, and the one thing we try and do, I'm part of an organization that tries to use travelers as sentinels to tell us what's going on in other countries, so that if people come and see me afterwards with Zika, for example, then I will report anonymously for them, but report where they acquired that, so that we get a better idea of where things are going on in the world and we can advise travelers better.
That is. Now, does that get reported to you
So,
from doctors and things
yeah,
too?
so it's people who are part of the International Society of Travel Medicine, and it's called the Geosentinel Surveillance Network. It's part of CDC in the US and ISTM.
Okay, and CDC, if I'm correct, and I might be wrong, is one of the places where you can get a list of what immunizations you need for which areas. Is that the right?
That's true, but I like to
Or is there a
send
better
people to
site?
Canada. So
Perfect,
Public
yeah.
Health Agency of
Okay.
Canada, and I chair a group called CATMAT, the Committee to Advise on Tropical Medicine and Travel, and we give recommendations for different things. So
Excellent.
certainly you can use CDC, you can use the Public Health Agency, and you can use the World Health Organization. They also give information for travelers. But one thing just to add is travel medicine usually is not covered across the country, so you have to put in the time to make sure if you need to see a travel medicine provider, you do that, and realize it may cost you some money for that, but hopefully it's worth it with prevention.
I think a lot of things are very easily,
Prevention.
they're definitely worth that $200, definitely, I can understand that. Yeah. Now, are there other things that you should watch out for other than mosquitoes? There must be hidden things. I've had people tell me, for example, that they have gone to some of the places in Lake Valley and had manicures on the beach or whatever. Are these things that everybody should avoid, or the people with immune compromise need to watch?
Yeah, I think you need to be careful with respect to that. The thing that people worry about with respect to places where they can't clean equipment between patrons, there's things like hepatitis B, for example, and so people should be immunized against that. And you should look and make sure that things look pretty clean. I mean, you can get manicures around the world potentially, but you want to make sure where you're going is relatively clean, the same way you would do in Canada. I mean, some people walk into some salons and they walk right back out, right?
Right.
Even though we have more stringent health regulations and public health helps to make the places we might go safer in Canada, they don't have the same ability in much of the world. So yeah, it's buyer beware, I think, with respect to some of that stuff.
Now, not to scare people, but should people stop traveling if they have immune compromise? So what are your recommendations? That
So I think that
they only go to safe places?
I think you have to plan ahead and you have to be realistic with respect to the risks, but certainly with a lot of the new drugs that are available, people feel wonderful and they can do stuff, and you don't want to miss out with respect to a lot of the wonders of the world. However, you need to do some research beforehand and see. So things like going into caves, for example, and doing stuff. There's things in caves that if you're immune compromised, you can get a lot sicker with. So you need to think about things beforehand. Maybe you don't want to go and volunteer on a tuberculosis ward, for example, in a hospital somewhere if you've got immune deficiency. It doesn't mean you can't volunteer somewhere else or do something else. So I think that there really shouldn't be a lot of restrictions, but you need to do a lot of investigations before and figure out where it might be safest for you to go with respect to where things are for you at that time, right, with respect to your disease and everything else.
Thank you, Dr. McCarthy. So if I would say, to sum up everything, if I were to say that, yes, people with rheumatoid can still do everything if they plan ahead, if they think about, perhaps what medications you need to take during a period when you're not taking your biologics. But other than that, stay safe and you can do the same thing everyone else does.
If I can make one last plug,
Absolutely.
and I didn't ask you this beforehand, I
No,
apologize.
of course
There's
you
an
can.
organization in Canada called IAMAT, I-A-M-A-T, and they, if you give them a $10 to $15 donation, will send you maps of every country you think you want to go to. They have lists of physicians who agree to see travelers that have some Western training and some English, and they're a real good safety line if you're going to go travel. So it might be something that's worth investing in if somebody's thinking about traveling more. They're in Guelph, they're a Canadian-born organization, and it's
I will be looking at that.
Yeah,
I will pass it on to my sister. She has a senior home assisted living, and I know her seniors do a lot of traveling.
Oh, fantastic.
So I'm sure that they'll be there. Thank you.
So just to clarify, for our audience, the website for IAMAT, is it IAMAT?
IAMAT, yeah.
Okay.
So it's
And-
iamat.org, I think. I don't know which one. If you Google IAMAT, you'll find it. Stuff is together now, so
Yeah.
you can look under there and find health tips, and you can find stuff from CatMat. So CatMat recommendations are really geared more towards clinicians, so physicians and nurses and pharmacists that are doing travel medicine, but the Public Health Agency often has loads of information geared for travelers themselves.
And someone also wants to know, what are some natural methods of preventing mosquito bites just because they're allergic to DEET or they don't want to use too much chemicals?
Right. So it's not a lot of chemical to use, I'll tell you. There are some things. Citronella works somewhat, not quite as effective, but can have some protection. The permethrin that I mentioned, which is on your clothes, once that's sprayed on your clothes, you can't tell it's there. You can't feel it, smell it. When you touch it, it feels no different, and it really gives you a lot of protection. So there are natural products out there. They don't work quite as well. It may mean you have to use them more often. But even in CatMat, they have information on many different products, which includes, I think, the natural products. So you can get ideas with respect to that, what to use.
And I suppose covering up is important too.
Correct. Yeah,
And
so a
that's
very
good health.
easy thing,
Yeah.
but that's an easy thing to say, but when it's
But
40
when it's
degrees out, it's
very
kind of
hot,
hard, right?
that's right.
So again, it's something to plan for, to think about, you know, especially if you like to take nice early morning walks, see the sunrise, then you should have stuff that covers you up, especially if you don't want to use repellents.
Thank you so much,
Thank
Dr.
you very
McCarthy,
much.
and good luck with your next, you've got a workshop
I do
coming
shortly.
right after this. Thank you
Thank
very
you so
much.
much.